First though, as I said on Monday, the number one, number two and number three issue that matters to all Australians is the cost of living. Whether it be energy bills, the cost of basics like food, fuel prices, they're down a bit but still crippling, and the big one, paying off the debt you owe your bank to buy a roof over your head. Or, if you're running a small, medium or big business, the increased costs post-COVID of keeping the doors of that business open and, as most importantly, your workers employed. Now, forget all the distractions we're seeing out of Canberra this week and have a listen to one incredible example of a Melbourne aged care operator, Lou Pascuzzi, who will join us shortly live. Lou, like thousands of business people around Australia, is being smashed by rising costs caused by tax increases and policy changes from both the state and federal governments. The Herald Sun in Melbourne broke this story today, and it was followed up on radio. And listening to Lou's year-on-year cost increases, you'd wonder why anybody bothers to build a business and run it in this country anymore. Why would you? If you think I'm exaggerating, well, we'll talk to Lou in a second. Well, I'll tell you I'm not. Lou owns Victoria's biggest family-owned aged care provider, a company called TLC Aged Care. TLC has 12 aged care centres in Melbourne and regional Geelong. His power bills are about to double this year to, wait for it, a whopping $850,000. Double. You wonder what Chris Bowen, who keeps running around the country spouting off about solar and wind power, Bowen was even outside Parliament today in Canberra spruiking EV-powered rideshare services. Now, seriously, Minister, get real. Mr Pascuzzi has solar panels, but the green zealotry shutting down coal-fired power stations and locking up gas supplies sees his power bill double, $850,000 a year. Lou doesn't want an electric-powered Uber. He wants power bill relief. Relief, by the way, you might remind everybody, your government, the Labor government in Canberra, promised during the election campaign. And it doesn't stop in Canberra. While the federal government increased aged care in the recent budget from $223 to $260 per resident per day, their mates in Victoria slapped an increase on payroll tax. The cost for Lou? $1.3 million on top of the payroll tax he pays annually. An extra $1.3 million. A tax for employing people. Now, what a dumb tax that is anyway. And it gets worse. Aged care means lots of laundry. That runs to millions of dollars. But the list goes on and on. Now, aged care, remember, also is now required to have a trained nurse on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So he's got to pay for that as well. Lou strikes me as a great operator. And I imagine he's someone like Lou, gave up and shut down his 12 homes. He won't, but others will. And where then will the elderly Australians go to live? Look, I haven't even mentioned food costs in these places. Canberra can spend all their time talking about the voice, prosecuting the case for zero emissions and the implausible ambitions versus reality to get there. People like Lou might not be around much longer if they don't do the right thing and concentrate, as I said, on the cost of living. Now, first up, let's bring Lou Pascuzzi from TLC Aged Care in. Lou, I talked about this at the start here. How frustrated are you by the actions of Canberra and the state government?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me in the studio, Steve. Frustration, or to say I'm absolutely frustrated is an understatement. This has been going on for 9 years, and for 9 years I've held my tongue. But when it gets to a point where it starts to affect our company, and the only reason it really hasn't in the last 9 years is because we saw this coming. So we took a diversified approach to our business, and we concentrically diversified into services that would benefit our core business, which was residential aged care. And a good example of that was opening community medical centres in our aged care homes that not only provided another stream of revenue, but also provided a heightened level of care for our residents. And we've actually committed to a number of those initiatives, but it gave us an additional level of revenue. So it insulated us somewhat from the price increases. But when we finally get, very late in the piece, some granular information around our new funding regime and the new level of funding the government has thankfully provided the industry effective July 1. That for us in the real increase of care funding and indexation is around $8.7 million. But Steve, there's a significant inequity here, and it's an inequity that's too big for me not to have spoken about. And that is, you're right, electricity. It's not going up to $850,000, Steve. It's going up by $850,000. So our electricity bill next financial year will be somewhere in the vicinity of $1.7 million. Our gas bill, $350,000 increase there. Our payroll tax bill, an extra $1.3 million there. Our salaries and wages EBA increase, an extra $4 million there, 4.4 to be exact. Our hoteliers' fees, laundry, cleaning, catering, gardening, maintenance, fire management has gone up a whopping $4 million. Our consumables prices have gone up $500,000 thanks to inflation. That, if you total that, Steve, that's an $11.8 million increase in expenses, all relative to the economic conditions where unfortunately we find ourselves in, and also a lack of understanding with regard to the real costs of the industry relative to the funding increases. So for this, these motherhood statements and this propaganda to be spread that we're doing so much for aged care, we're investing so much more in aged care. The inequity is still there, and it's there significantly. And that doesn't count. We were actually quite lucky, Steve. We qualified for self-insurance for workers' compensation. So we haven't had a workers' compensation premium for the last 3 years. Our premium 3 years ago was $2 million a year. Now, workers' compensation premiums effective July 1 go up 75%. So that's an additional $1.5 million we would have had to pay had we have not been one of the lucky firms that have qualified for self-insurance. So when you consider a company like ours that has been insulated from these costs because of our diversified, innovative model, now starting to talk about it, it's problematic. But what about those 66% of residential aged care homes that have openly said that they're making a loss? How do they survive? 12%, Steve, 12% of all of the 2,500 aged care homes at the moment are up for sale. And I've signed non-disclosure agreements with advisory firms and banks, so I can't say which of them they are, but ultimately that's 300 aged care homes that are up for sale. We have 200,000 operational residential aged care places in Australia at the moment. We have a tsunami of baby boomers and intergenerational change coming in the next 10 years where we will require an additional 100,000 beds. Who's going to build the beds, Steve? Ultimately, at this point, with this inequity and the number of companies or providers exiting the market, we just won't be able to service the need going forward.
So who do you blame? I mean, without your diversification, your business model is busted and you probably go broke. You've been clever and you won't. But who do you blame for all of these costs? I mean, it's a combination, I guess, of Canberra and the Victorian Labor government. But that payroll tax increase alone, I mean, that's a tax on employing people, Lou.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've never been a fan of payroll tax, but in terms of blame, unfortunately, Steve, the governments of today are the governments today. You can't blame them. You can't just blame the governments of today. This has been a systemic issue for the last 40 years. We've been throwing money every 5 years when providers are on their knees. Every 5 years, we've been throwing lumps of money at them to run and try and sustain the same model that's been in operation for that time. Now, consumer expectations have changed. When the baby boomers come in, they're going to be heightened again, the consumer expectations. This model is not fit for purpose. It's not fit for purpose. So ultimately, to keep throwing money at it, it's only going to result in 2 or 3 years' time, aged care providers again on their knees and requesting an increase in funding again. So how often can the taxpayer be hit every 4 or 5 years with this, basically additional appropriation of tax monies to that service. It's a never-ending story. Surely we can see that the model doesn't work, and it's time to change the model. This insular model that 99% of aged care providers operate, because they've been shown no other way, and they've just been used to putting their hand out and just asking for more money every 5 years and guilting governments and people into the fact that they're looking after Australia's most vulnerable, so they're almost forced to give them money because it's politically the right thing to do.
Well,
that's unsustainable. It's unsustainable,
Lou, it takes people like you with the guts you've got to speak out, and I'm so pleased you've done it today. And you're a brave man. Governments tend to pay back people who speak out too strongly. But Lou, thanks for joining us tonight. There you go, folks. That is just extraordinary.